And welcome to the WMEA Sunday broadcast. Today I'm talking about the challenges of the path. I couldn't help but think about life in itself is a challenge. So the title, The Challenges of the Path, may seem a little odd, but not really. And this is why. When you're on a spiritual path, you're not only adhering to the lighted path, which includes disciplines for the soul, but you are also living and walking a path of humanity. So it's almost like a parallel path where on one hand we have the path that humanity is traveling. So that would be, an overall path, but not necessarily a conscious journey. Whereas a spiritual path ultimately will be a conscious journey, one of the unfolding human soul. So where we have these dual paths, eventually they will come together. So this morning I'm going to be talking about the struggles and challenges of being an Agni yogi, especially the inner challenges. The essence of the life of an Agni yoga student is directed to the inner struggle between the self and the self, the lesser self and the greater self. So think about the story and life of Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, where he is engaged in a terrible conflict, a battle which is symbolized where each human being must literally fight against himself. When he or she enters his path of perfection, the path to the Father's home. So now we have another word to add to the path of perfection. In the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is standing on the battlefield midway between two opposing armies, his forces and the army of his kinsmen. He was confused and did not think that he should try to defeat his family members who were threatening his survival. The opposing army actually represents Arjuna's personality, composed of his physical, emotional, and mental desires and his illusions. Now put yourself in this role, in Arjuna's role. Now the spiritual army, the army of the higher self, wanted him to stand for right human relations, for goodwill, and the unity of all life. This is the army that represented Arjuna's higher self and wants him to live a virtuous life, a life of self-sacrifice for the furthering of his evolution. These two sides of a disciple clash on the battlefield, our battlefield of daily life. See the two paths here? These two sides will continue to fight until either our higher self or the personality is victorious. So if you've not read the Bhagavad Gita, which is part of the Mahabharata epic, do so. There are many versions out there to read, and each version is translation of the original, and so each version will be a little bit different. The one that we read and study in White Mountain is the one that was written by Torkim Saradarian. He translated his own translation of the Bhagavad Gita. So it's, for us, it's a little easier to understand when we read this story, the Bhagavad Gita, from a symbolic point of view. Then it's not related, to a particular decade or era, but it is ageless. So we can understand this battle that Arjuna was going through. We can be Arjuna. We can recognize in his story that we, in fact, are Arjuna. So the disciple either falls into terrible inertia, or where the person is released to a life of sacrificial service for the advancement of the human race. Let's take a look at the duality of each body. Now, this is part of the opposing army. The physical body wants to be lazy. It really does. There's a point in time and place that the body finally says, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. So it's a natural tendency at a certain point in a person's life where the physical body wants to be lazy, while the spiritual part always wants to labor. So this is a duality that we're going to be experiencing throughout our life on the path, and represents one of the challenges of the path. The spiritual side of a person wants to create labor because through hard work, the person will meet many difficulties and obstacles, which makes them to grow spiritually, to spiritually mature, and thereby making an ordinary life into a unique life, an exceptional life, and then understands what it means to experience the challenges, of the path, that other path, the path of the higher self. So the emotional body wants all desires fulfilled, but the spirit wants joy. Eventually these desires wane as we get older. Normally they wane. But being on the spiritual path, we need to set these desires, these personality desires, aside, so it opens the door to a new experience of joy. And this is why Agni Yoga has this phrase that joy is a special wisdom. Pleasure and desire is something that comes to us, while joy radiates out of us. Joy radiates out of us. This is part of the inner life, where joy radiates out from us. So we try to collect things for our own gratification, but the Agni Yogi, the disciple who is radioactive, gives of themselves because of a deep love. The mental body also really likes to collect things. Intellectually developed people who do not feel the pull of the spirit want more and more possessions. The spiritual body does not want to be cluttered with all of these objects. It wants to give and to sacrifice. So you see the difference? Again, these two paths. The two armies are within us. Victory is achieved when the spiritual side conquers the physical, emotional, and mental mess that we are living in. The physical body becomes spiritual when it is really industrious. The emotional body becomes spiritual when it tries to give joy and happiness to others. The mental body becomes spiritual when it tries to think of, now listen to this, when the mental body becomes spiritual, when it tries to think of sacrificial things that he or she can do so that others have more striving and courage and daring. See how different this kind of a life is? It is becoming more profoundly different, it seems to me, in the direction that the world is going today. So, this is our challenge, to let our physical body become spiritual, our emotional body to become spiritual, and our mental body to become spiritual. And in that process requires certain responsibilities. We have to become industrious. We want to try to give joy and happiness to others and to think of sacrificial things, how to strive sacrificially, which means to engage in more striving, to have courage, and especially daring. Master M is sounding a great call to all of humanity. He is presenting humanity with the challenge of the Spirit. Do you see this? So it's the disciples in the world that then become messengers of the great ones, the masters, the great beings of hierarchy, representing those who have accomplished, have been successful, and graduated from this path of perfection. And now those that are on this path of perfection ultimately become masters, messengers of the masters who have already accomplished this. So MM is presenting humanity with the challenge of the Spirit, which is the call to battle against the enemy of the personality. Agni Yoga is not giving a teaching that tries to pacify us. Agni Yoga is presenting a teaching that will challenge us to strive more in the light and with love. Now here's a legend about Buddha. A righteous man wished to see Buddha. His attention was being kept upon a wide variety of subjects. His hands did not grasp the images of wisdom. His eyes did not penetrate the objects of reverence. And the manifestation of his hope to see Buddha did not come. Finally, bending low in prayer, this righteous man, this seeker, felt a web, the thread of a web, descend on his forehead. He cast it away. Then a clear voice rang out, "Why dost thou reject my hand? My ray has followed thee. permit me to embrace thee. Then the sun serpent became a tremble in the man, and he sought the rejected thread. And in his hands, this thread turned into 40 pearls. And each pearl bore the image of Buddha. Imagine this. In their center was a stone, and upon it this description were 3 words: valor, despair, and joy. The follower of Buddha received joy because he knew the path to it. Verily, the majestic is the picture of the ocean of the Spirit. The sound of the call drones and rings out, and they who have accepted the weapon of the Spirit are now striving toward the altar, toward the Father's home. Because the daughter of the world, the mother of the world, the daughter of the world has completed her spiritual raiment. Onward, the verse says, onward to battle, battle, battle. I hear the call and bow my head before the command of the blessed Lord. And that's from Leaves of Moria's Garden 2, page 99. The real teaching makes us so angry at our life that we work really, really hard to change. To become a disciple, to change means to eventually become a disciple in the heart of the Master. When you find a teaching that tells you everything is beautiful, the teaching tells us, leave that teaching. Sooner or later, such a teaching will take our money and our free will as well. We will know the real teaching because it is called the call to battle. That's the real teaching, the call to battle. It tells us that only through sacrifice, labor, daring, and heroic works can we progress. False teachings tell us to stay where we are because everything is so beautiful. The real teaching says, get up. You have a lot of work to do if you are going to evolve into a higher kingdom, which is called the superhuman kingdom. Whenever you are looking for an easy way out, you are entering the most dangerous path. Isn't that interesting? See, this is so different, isn't it, from ordinary life? The ordinary life says, find comfort, seek comfort, and once you find comfort, you will find happiness. The teaching says that's the easy way out. And if you take the easy way out, that's the most dangerous path. It's not that we won't find happiness on the spiritual path. Happiness takes on a different garment and gives way to joy and bliss. So the disciple will not be drawn to things that do not lead to achievement. That's the formula for us. Be drawn to things that lead us to achievement. Allow yourself to be drawn to things that will lead you to achievement. The teaching flows against the current. The teaching leads to the path where we must fight against laziness and comfort. Common and comfortable things make us give up our quest for a higher path because we surrender ourselves to our lower nature. It's like we give in to our lower nature and say, take over. I give up. But when there is a steep path in front of us, the teaching challenges us to climb against all difficulties. This is when we really progress. So hard work and striving are the real teaching. Hard work and striving. When you start to accept the teaching as a nice Sunday morning lecture, you have stopped your progress on the path. The teaching tells us that the only way to progress is to create difficulties in our life. Difficulties that lead toward what? Achievement. Difficult. So we're not just going to, pick something out that may be difficult that will set us up to fail or has no rhyme nor reason to the purpose of our life or the life of humanity. But we must find something, find a difficulty that will lead us to achievement. So that's something to really think about, maybe during the rest of the day. So easy paths lead to destruction. Difficult paths collect our energies so that we keep awake and keep striving. Eventually, we must achieve a great victory over our nature. If our friends and co-workers seek the easy way, you will know that they do not stand for improvement. MM tells us that when a new person wants to join your organization, he must or she must be tested. Give him heavy labor and make him do things that he hates to do. If he refuses or complains, the teaching says, now you know he is not one of you. The teacher or master or kohan is there to make you work against the lower self. They make you progress in such a way that you become the master of your own instrument. The path toward the hierarchy is not paved with sweet words of false praise and encouragement to enjoy life. The path toward hierarchy tells us that we are living in a dangerous time and that strong-minded workers are really, really needed to do heavy work with no payment or reward. We need people who will fight and labor for the salvation of humanity. MM says the most difficult is the most accessible. Think about this. The most difficult is the most accessible. Why? Because it's not popular. There's no long standing line or line of standing people waiting to buy their new iPhones. Yeah, the most difficult is the most accessible. We think that the most difficult thing is the hardest task to accomplish. Now here's a personal story. When I was very young. When I was a young mother, I found myself on the shore of the rising tide waters of the Potomac River with my two very young boys. We had to get to higher ground, and the only way to do so was to enter the river, to go around a fallen tree to get to the other side and to climb to safety. I gathered both little ones up in my arms, plus our stuff. I tried to call out for my husband, but he was out somewhere because he was engaged in a task because he was working for the Smithsonian at the time. So the boys and I were on our own. As I entered into the reason, it's like the tide, like I was saying, the tide was rising. And if you've ever been on that particular river, you have this a great amount of beach, which is wonderful. It's rocky. It's not like Florida. It's very rocky, but there's a lot of space there. But when the tide comes in, that space begins to diminish. And you've got to get out of there, or you're going to be stuck overnight. So it was time to leave. As I entered into the river, I saw a water moccasin, which of course is a very venomous snake. Having had various encounters with snakes as I was growing up, I had grown to have a less than healthy fear of them. What to do? I knew that we could not stay where we were on the beach. The sun was setting, the tide was rapidly coming in. The only way to safety was to walk around that fallen tree, the tree that was blocking our way to safety. And yet here was the water moccasin. It was a real situation, let me tell you. As I looked at it snaking its way around the tree limbs and the rising tide, and then looking at my two babies, I knew I don't have a choice here. I had to believe that the snake was as afraid of me as I was of it. I had to be clear thinking and careful. I had to overcome my fear to save us from harm. And then suddenly the snake disappeared into the darkness of the water, and I could no longer see it. Where did he go? Was he coming closer, or was he going further out into the river? So I pushed myself to walk out to the end of the fallen tree and on over to the other side, and finally to safety. Let me tell you, this is a real test of courage. I learned something about myself in that moment. For myself, it was a heroic action. The most difficult is the most accessible. Here was a victory. The hidden energies that are buried deep within us will never manifest if we do not awaken them and use them. When there is a need, the energies will be at our service. They will be ready to be used in our persistent quest because we overcame our physical, emotional, and mental bodies, so that our spiritual beingness and reality can reveal itself to us. The persistent quest in the battle against ourselves awakens powerful energies of heroism, austerity, solemnity, concentration, control, simplicity, and beauty. All of these things are awakened when the spoiled child, the physical, emotional, and mental bodies come under the control of Arjuna, the fighting warrior and disciple. Striving reveals the Agni Yogi's inner divinity, because through striving, they master their instruments. In this way, they become a real help to others. Their associates notice that they are really in control, and they look to him or her for guidance. By setting an example of victory, the disciple shows others that they too can conquer their obstacles. So striving is the building up of spiritual muscles. Think of that. Striving is the building up of spiritual muscles so that all of our internal enemies are destroyed. It's interesting, these enemies do disguise themselves, but the disciple will observe himself very carefully and will expose them. Expose these internal enemies. The disciple will notice the gossip, will notice and find the laziness, will find the touchiness. That all leads eventually to self or soul infusion and transfiguration. Soul infusion and transfiguration. Buddha said that blood could not be stopped by blood, but that it could be stopped by love. Love crushes the accumulation of energy being directed against us. This is a phrase you might want to write down. Love crushes the accumulation of energy that is being directed against you. And this is why love generates its own force, so that you do not have to violently attack others. If someone is spreading unkind lies about you because of their jealousy, treat them with kindness and love. The next time they start to tell a lie about you, they will feel so ugly and awful that perhaps they will be ashamed. The advice "do not resist evil" means that you do not lie when someone else does, even if that person lies against you, is lying against you. When someone does something wrong against you, don't take out revenge on that person, that wrongdoer. The teaching suggests that the best approach is to do something good back for him or her, so that we can overcome the enemy, or the enemy that is within, that we're all trying to destroy. Someone must say, "This is enough. I will stop the accumulation of karma between us." It's pretty powerful, and this is why it takes courage and daring and striving. Someone must say, "This is enough. I will stop the accumulation of karma between us." People don't realize the significance of karma. In the end, your karma and their karma are one. So by eliminating the karma of someone else, listen to this formula, by eliminating the karma of someone else, you are eliminating obstacles on your own path. Help your brother and help yourself by not continuing with the karmic accumulations which will later come back and haunt you. Master M says, and I quote from Fiery World, Volume 2, Paragraph 30, "One must understand action and the everlasting battle with chaos. One must realize it as the only path to grow and grow to love Let me start this again. One must realize it as the only path and grow to love it as the sign of the Creator's trust. Again, that's paragraph 30, Fiery World 2. It is best for us to understand that the battle is never going to end because we are battling against imperfection. You are a person. We are a person. I can't read this morning. I'm sorry. So let me start over again here. We are either an average person or we are an aspirant. And this is how we move. We become, we start out as an average human being. That's just the process of life. We have to start out as an average human being to become a master over what is average. They gain mastery over what is average. So we start out as a person, then we become an aspirant. Then we become a disciple and eventually become an Agni yogi, an accepted disciple in the heart of the master. But we are not yet a master. You work and you become a master, but you are not yet a Kohan. When you become a Kohan, you are not yet a planetary logos, and so on. Greater battles take us to greater levels on the evolutionary spiral. The teaching must manifest in our lives as a practical guide, which is going to direct us on this long battle. The challenges found in battle are directed toward all those forces which prevent the spiritualization of mankind and do not let the human soul proceed on the path of perfection. It's a very profound statement, for us to think about and then to observe the truth that's found in these words. The challenges found in battle are directed toward all of those forces which prevent the spiritualization of mankind and do not let the human soul proceed on the path of perfection. So the disciple must fight against hypocrisy, totalitarianism, fanaticism, bribery, flattery, ego and vanity, and many other things. These things are not only happening on the physical plane. The Agni yogi must also fight more subtle forces of chaos or evil. All of this fight is carried on in the light of hierarchy. So let me close with this story. A boy came to the Chinese master and said, "Can I learn in your monastery?" The master said, "Yes, my son." He said, "Come here and enter the river." You know what's coming. So the boy entered the river, and it was 4 or 5 feet deep. The teacher put his hand on the boy's head and pushed the boy under the waters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The boy is dying. 8, 9, 10. He came up. Then the teacher said, "Why did you come up? What are you really aspiring and striving for while you were under the water?" He said, "Air." Well, the teacher said, if you in just that way search for the teaching, it will be given to you. And the story ends this way. But you did not come to that stage yet because you are fooling around with the fish. Okay. So that's it. The challenges of the path. Have a good week.